Okay, let's get on with Jesus. Matthew chapter 16. We're going to start in verse 13, and this is one of my favorite passages in the New Testament. It is just a critical passage. It says, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." And then Jesus asked, "But what about you? Who do you say that I am?" And I think this is the most compelling question ever asked in human history. Jesus asking his disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" And certainly that question he poses to each and every one of us. Who do you say that I am? Now, Simon Peter, he was always the one that took the lead, and so he responded immediately. Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Well, that was the correct answer, and we're going to delve into exactly what that answer means. But before we do, we're going to look at this debate that question sparked 2,000 years ago. That question has found its way in every single culture and society since Christ was here. Folks have been asking that question and trying to figure out, who is this Jesus? I always love to check on the internet and see what people are saying about him. And here are some quotes that I found yesterday. Here's one: Jesus was a rabble rouser. He was a good, smart guy that lived and died about 2,000 years ago. He was oft misquoted in scriptures that were recopied countless times before the printing press by illiterate scribes. This guy said that gods were invented by simple minds to explain the otherwise unexplainable. Myth, folklore, legend, ghost stories. So according to this guy, who is Jesus? Just a myth, just a folklore. Has no relevance to us here and now. There was one thread of conversation that took place on this question, who is Jesus? And a girl named Liza wrote, "I think Jesus might have been a good person in his time. Today, he is a monument to the stupidity of Christians. Just like Allah he is and the rest of the so-called gods are." So he's just a monument to us stupid Christians. And somebody decided to put a post or reply to that comment. And here's what this person says: "Liza, you just need to stamp 666 on your forehead and get ready for the devil." Of course, that was said in Christian love, I'm sure. Said he may have existed historically, but his main place is as the central figure in a series of morality plays called the Bible. A modern version of Aesop, where each tale is a story used to illustrate a point. So it doesn't matter if he existed or if he didn't exist. He's just a central figure in a bunch of tales to explain certain truths or moralities. Here's one: "I don't believe such a man existed at all. Although I admit it's possible that the Jesus of the Bible is loosely based on an ordinary human being that was not God and made no miracles. In my opinion, the Gospel of Mark, upon which the other Gospels are based and ultimately all of Christianity, was originally written as an allegorical fiction. Jesus represents the Jewish people during the later part of the first century." So it's just an allegory. Then one person said, "I don't know if he was real or not. Perhaps there was a real person named Jesus, but a lot of the mythology surrounding him has been constructed from stories in other older religions. I lean to Jesus being a patchwork of religious leaders of his time and older myths that were still popular. If he is a real dude, I believe the stories surrounding him are more fiction than fact. And then sometimes, listen to this, sometimes I believe Paul literally dreamed the whole thing up when he realized that Christianity might be his ticket to a larger pulpit. Wow. I mean, Paul was beaten, he starved to death, he was imprisoned. What a large pulpit. Man, it didn't give him any fame or fortune. It just gave him a lot of misery. But he knew his Jesus. But those are just some of the things that are being said about Jesus today. And those things have been being said about Jesus for 2,000 years. And so the debate continues. Who is this man Jesus? Who do you say that he is? And when you really look at the court of public opinion, it comes down to three basic conclusions. He doesn't exist and people don't really care. That's one conclusion that people have. Second conclusion is he does exist, but he's totally irrelevant. He was just a historical figure back in the days, of the Roman Empire. He had a little following, and that's it. So he existed, but he's irrelevant. And then there's a third conclusion that is found in the court of public opinion today. He was a prophet or a teacher, and we are to emulate him. He stands as a great figure in history, and we are to emulate him. We are to try to do what he did so that we can become like he is. There is a painting, and if you want to turn to the next slide, I don't know if you can really get a good feel of what this is, but this is a painting that is in the Capitol building in the Rotunda. It is up in the dome. It was painted up in the dome of the Rotunda in the Capitol building of Washington, D.C. It was painted in 1865 by an Italian artist named Brumidi. And this painting is called the Apotheosis of Washington. Okay? So George Washington is the central figure of this painting. He is in that center circle at the very bottom of the center circle. That's George Washington. He is flanked by two female figures representing liberty and victory. There's a rainbow at his feet and 13 maidens symbolizing the original states. There are also other aspects of this painting that look at science and philosophy and religion. But it's called the Apotheosis of Washington. Now, how many of you know what the word apotheosis means? Wow. I stand here feeling pretty smart. Well, guess what? I didn't know either. But I looked it up. And the word apotheosis means this. It's the raising of a person to the rank of a god. It is the raising of a person to the rank of a god. Okay? So what's being depicted here? George Washington, being elevated to the rank of a god. Now, I'm not saying that's what George Washington believed. I'm not making any commentary about the belief system of George Washington, whether he was a Christian or a deist or any of those things. What I'm saying is that there was an Italian artist who in 1865 depicted Washington as someone being elevated to the rank of a god. Now, is that familiar? Is that any different than what Satan said to Adam and Eve in the garden? That you can be like God. That lie has been perpetuated for 6,000 years, will continue to be perpetuated until Jesus returns. And it finds its way into almost every nook and cranny of life. And in almost every generation, it just gets repackaged. But it's still the same old lie. You can be like God. And so in the court of public opinion, there is a vast number of people who believe Jesus is an example to follow. That Jesus was one of us, and he actually, through all of his life, perfected himself and achieved the status of godhood. And if we will follow him, we can do the very same. That's why a lot of conversations with people, you get involved in it, and they start talking about Jesus, and they start talking about him being this great, wonderful teacher and this moral example, and you're thinking, wow, we're tracking together, and you think you're on the same page. But you're not on the same page at all, because they believe that Jesus is someone to be emulated, not trusted. Big difference, isn't there? If he was just one of us that became a God, then he has set the pattern so that we can self-actualize and maybe become gods ourselves. That's Mormonism, folks. That's what Mormonism is. They believe Jesus was an example, that through his obedience, he rose to the level of godhood, and he set that as a pattern for us, and we're to follow. Okay? So, in the court of public opinion, he either doesn't exist and people don't care, he existed but he's irrelevant, or he's an example for us to follow and emulate. He's not someone that we should trust. But the Bible gives us a completely different message. We can't achieve godhood, can we? God never created us for that. But we can be more than what we are right now, or when we came into the world. We came into this world dead in sin, separated from the life of God. Jesus Christ becomes the connection point to raise us to life so that we can experience a relationship with God. That's why Jesus came. He was God, always was God, and he came and he took upon human flesh so that we could know God. Not become God, but to know God and to trust him.